Hello, welcome to Podsongs. I'm Jack Stafford, and I interview inspiring people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. I've been so lucky with the guests I'm getting on the show. More interesting people all the time, more well-known people, and I'm lucky today to be able to speak to one of the original podcasters. It's been going 10 years almost, host of Tangentially Speaking, and also the author of Sex at Dawn. Quite a cult character, and also a voice that I would like to have in 10 years when I'm more relaxed. That kind of, I just woke up 10 minutes ago voice. You know, it's very relaxing to listen to. So please welcome Christopher Ryan.
Jack.
Hello, Chris.
How are you, man?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you. How am I coming through?
Very loud and clear.
Loud and clear. All right. Sounds like we might have a delay to deal with.
Yeah, that would be annoying, yeah. Is it my end or?
I don't know. Your video was scrambled, but it looks clear now. Maybe it's gone away. I don't know. In any case, okay. I'm sure we're both used to that.
Yeah, it's meteorological conditions or somewhere. We're a long way away. We should just be grateful to be able to chat.
There you go.
Maybe we could turn off video then. I mean, does that make it easier? Does that make it a bit faster?
Whatever you prefer.
Yeah, let's turn that off. I was expecting you to see you in a van, though.
Yeah, no, not this time of year. That's coming up at the end of May.
Wow.
We just got about 2 feet of snow here, so I would not want to be living in my van right now.
So, and how long do you have to chat? I always ask my guests that because sometimes they say less time than.
Yeah, about an hour. Is that what you generally schedule?
Perfect. Yeah, my mum hates it when I go over.
Okay.
Yeah,
an hour's good.
My podcasts are too long.
She must not listen to Joe Rogan.
I know. I don't. That's what I said.
Yeah. He sort of changed the whole format. Mine go between an hour and a half. Sometimes less than that, but rarely more than that.
So I've just discovered your podcast quite recently because, I heard. I was looking for I'll tell a bit of a story to give you the background. I was looking for some visual accompaniment to my songs, and I came across this animator, Dave Anderson, and because he does some really great stuff for other musicians I like, and I found that he did a video based on one of your childhood stories. Yeah. I've actually met Dave. He and his, I don't know if his wife or his girlfriend moved to Barcelona, and we hung out and had a beer at least once or twice. I think it was just when I was moving away, so I think we actually gave him some of our furniture or something. But yeah, he did a great job on that video. He contacted me, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so before he completed it, and just sort of said, "Hey, do you mind if I do an animation of a story you told on Rogan's podcast?" And I said, "No, of course not. It's public domain at this point. You can do whatever you want." And then, 6 months later, he sent me the animation. I was like, "Oh shit, that's what you chose to do? The most embarrassing story I've ever told in public." Thanks, buddy. I'll put it in. I won't ask you to tell the story. It's a great story, but I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. It's a great animation. I mean, the details are just so good. Because I'm talking about the 70s when I was a kid, and he's got, all these little details, the station wagon with the fake wood paneling on the outside and stuff. He really nails it.
Yeah, it's beautifully done. But I asked him to do a video, but he was, you got that done for free, but he's not cheap.
Yeah, yeah. No, I checked with him later about doing something. I think to promote Civilized to Death or something. And yeah, he got back to me with his price, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, that's probably more. My publisher doesn't want to pay for it, so
I can
yeah,
actually
it takes a lot of work.
Oh, it does. I can record about 2 albums for the same price as one video for him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good for him. He does good work. I'm sure someone's paying him for it.
Well, I can't imagine how much work that is to do, to sit down for hours and hours and draw these pictures and get it all together. And I mean, incredible amount of work.
Yeah. Well, I like your work too. Your fresh and clean video. That's like an earworm. That song's been going. You know, some friends and I watched it, and we're laughing about it. And then last night we had some friends over for dinner, and I showed it again. And my friend was like, "Oh, great! Now I got that song in my head for another 2 days." It's really funny.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote that song for. I actually wrote that song for my girlfriend quite a while ago. She's very regular now; it's no problem. But then I had Naveen Jain on, and his Viome company, and I don't really want to promote. A billionaire doesn't need too much help, so I didn't want to write a song about how you should get your microbiome tested, even though I know it's something you might appeal to you. I know you're very into that, but so I just recycled this old song that I had about my girlfriend, and I edited the middle to mention microbiome, which I hadn't previously had in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I was expecting your girlfriend to come out of the bathroom there at the end of the song. You know, what's going on out here?
Yeah, unfortunately, she was filming it, so.
All right.
But she still gets upset because she didn't want me to share it, but she did the video, so she can't complain.
Yeah, yeah, good job.
So I really want to write a song about Civilized to Death. I think that's such poetic language you use in the book. You really paint a picture with a lot of that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's hard to write a book, a nonfiction book that's also fun to read, or has some kind of spice or humor or whatever. It's yeah, I don't know. It's always a challenge to try to. I think about when I'm writing something like that. I think about some professors I had in university who managed to convey information in ways that made you want to go to class, because they surprised you or they made you laugh, or their passion was palpable. And I feel like writing that kind of a book, that's what I'm always trying to do, is be that professor who makes you want to turn the next page and see what's going to happen. And if you can get some good language in there as well, some elegant writing, then that's a good day.
So did this book gradually evolve? Because you were obviously famous for Sex at Dawn, but these ideas you've been growing as you talk, because you have at the start of your podcast, you have these beautiful monologues, and then you play a song, and then you go into interviewing your guests. So have you been evolving these ideas over time?
Yeah, the ideas for Civilized to Death have been percolating in my mind since I was a kid, really. And I kind of felt, there were times when I was writing that book that I got stuck and felt kind of emotionally exhausted and almost gave up on it. And I guess the reason that I persisted and ultimately finished it was that I felt some kind of responsibility to tell the story of civilization more from the perspective of the people who have been
sort of steamrolled by it, like because we were sitting in the steamroller, our perspective of civilization is, this progress and, technological miracles and medical miracles and, sort of incredible accomplishment of our species. But that totally ignores the people who got flattened in the process, not to mention other species and entire ecosystems that have just been totally trashed. And so it's a hard thing to be immersed in every day. As a writer, it's just so kind of heavy and dark. And I hope it's not that way for a reader. As a reader, you spend 2 or 3 days with a book and you're done. As a writer, you spend, in this case, 5 years with this material. But I did feel this sense of obligation, like, the story deserves to be told from their perspective. And I've been thinking about that since I was a little kid. My first true intellectual passion was for Native American cultures, which hit me when I was maybe 11 or 12. And I read everything I could about different tribes and how they lived. And, I even sent away for Lakota language cassette tapes from the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. I was trying to learn Lakota when I was, 11 or 12 or something. So yeah, these ideas and seeing progress from the perspective of the losers has been something that's been on my mind my whole life, really.
That's something I wanted to ask you about with the book is, because I haven't finished it yet. Maybe you get onto it later and I haven't seen that, but about the spirituality aspect, do you think that's the thing that's missing and in modern civilization? And also where do you stand on reincarnation now as an adult?
Well, there is a section later in the book, I think it's called In the Absence of the Sacred. And I get into some of the spiritual poverty of modern civilization. And there is also, I'm not sure if it's in the same section of the book or not, but there's also a discussion of psychedelics and, mental health problems in contemporary civilization and how these are all sort of intertwined. The absence of meaning, as Viktor Frankl put it in Man's Search for Meaning, is sort of underlies so much of the mental health crisis and depression and suicide and self-harm and addiction, all these scourges of modern civilization can be traced in a large part to the absence of meaning and a feeling of despair that I think many people feel, not only because they see that, we're destroying the planet that we live on. That information has become widespread at this point, but also on a sort of more metaphysical level, the kind of corruption of religion and of religious-based belief systems, I think leaves many people with a sense of despair that this life is all there is. Mm-hmm. And there is no afterlife. There is no greater meaning. There is no, kind of karmic momentum where the things that I accomplish in this life, the lessons I learn, the good energy that I put into the world will somehow continue to have meaning beyond my death. And I think, that sort of, atheistic approach to life is very new for our species and very difficult. And it's having strange repercussions. I hear people, or I see on social media or something, someone saying, history will not be kind to so-and-so, or so-and-so's legacy, he's going to be sorry in 50 years when historians look back and blah. And I think these people don't care about legacy. They don't care about history's opinion of them, because their sort of fundamental operating principle is, I've got this life. It's it. That's it. When I die, I'm dead. I turn into dirt. And so I'm going to get everything I can now. I'm going to, get all the money I can. I'm going to get all the, whatever it is that they're into. There's no limiting factor, because this is it. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. As far as reincarnation goes, I don't have any strong opinions on that. I've read some very interesting research. I think Brian Stevenson, I think is his name. He was a professor of medicine at, I think, University of Virginia Medical School. And he was very interested in reincarnation, and he did some very solid scientific research on kids who claim to remember past lives. And he investigated, I think, 20 cases. There's a book of his, I think it's called 20 Cases of Suggestive Reincarnation. People can find it, I'm sure, online. But he was really interesting, and he found what appear to be pretty solid connections between the stories that these kids were telling, 3, 4 years old, 5 years old, something like that. And he and his assistants were able to track down the person who had died, and the kids remembered the sort of the family and where they lived and how they died. And with that information, they were able to track down the person. And then in some of the cases, the kids would go and meet the family. And there was this bizarre, the kid would walk in and say, "Oh, Michael, I haven't seen you since your wedding." And, Michael's like, "Oh my God, how do you know that?" And there are all sorts of information. So I don't know. That's very interesting. There's a book written about him. His name was Ian Stevenson. I think I said Brian. It's Ian Stevenson. His books are very hard to read because they're extremely dry, because he knew this was very sort of fringy research. So he wrote it in an extremely dry scientific manner. But there's a book about him and his research called Old Souls that was written by a journalist. And it's much more accessible. So if anyone wants to look into this, I'd recommend Old Souls. I don't remember the author's name.
I did hear about it. There's the Department of Perpetual Studies, and they got a grant from some millionaire to do this research, and that was part of the University of Virginia. And some of the kids were born with, their birthmarks. If they shot themselves, they had a little birthmark under their chin and a big birthmark on the top of their head. Yeah, that's true. He showed that, and also I think all or almost all of the cases were people who died young, and they died in some violent manner. Right. Either suicide or homicide or, an auto accident or something. It wasn't people who, lived a good long life and faded out. It was tragic deaths. Right. So maybe, maybe people. Go ahead. Maybe that's why they remember it, because you come back very quickly because you think you've got unfinished business.
Yeah. I wonder, it always makes me think about dreams, at this period of my life, I don't remember many dreams, but the ones I do are ones where I'm awakened suddenly.
Right. Exactly.
So if I'm in the midst of a dream and then, a door slams or something and I'm suddenly awake, I remember the dream. I remember where I was 5 seconds ago. Whereas if I just sort of wake up in the morning with the birds chirping and, the light coming through the window, I rarely remember.
So that stands to reason, I think, if you had a very spiritual life before, because when I think of spiritual people, and I try and imagine, because I'm personally not myself very spiritual, but I would like to be, and the people that I imagine are the most spiritual are the American Indians, because they're just the most grateful. They're saying thank you for the water, thank you for the air. They live their life in this gratitude, no?
Yeah, well, that's not only American Indians, but I think hunter-gatherer people all over the world. That's one of the commonalities that you find in their worldview, is a sense of gratitude, which makes a lot of sense because they're living in a world in which whatever they need is available. It's there. All they need to do is find it and take it. There's very little work put into cultivation and storage and, processing. It's basically whatever is necessary for their lives is right there in their environment, whether we're talking about shelter or food or medicine or, the necessities of life. So by and large, as far as I've been able to find from my research, these people tend to be, or are, I guess I can say, universally animist, meaning, as you said, that there's a sort of sense of spirit in everything in the world. There are spirits in rocks and trees and the wind and the sun and the moon and the stars and the river and in the animals that they eat and the fish and the birds, everything. So they're living in a world in which they feel everything is imbued with spirit and spiritual significance. And it's a world of incredible generosity because everything they need is right there. So, I often say it's like, imagine having, an Amex card with, no limit, and you never had to pay the bill. Anything you want is there. You just find it. And so you can travel very light the way hunter-gatherers do, because you don't need to carry things with you because whatever you need is there. Mm-hmm. So it's a very different approach to life. And there's a pivotal essay that was written, I think in the early 70s maybe, by Marshall Salins, who is a anthropologist. And this essay is called The Original Affluent Society. And it was one of the first modern sort of statements that hunter-gatherers who we, from our perspective, seem to be extremely poor because they don't really have anything. The way they view their lives is through a prism of affluence. They feel extremely rich. And when you sort of break down their lives and study them in metrics that make sense, like how much free time do they have, what kind of nutrition are they getting, how healthy are they, what kind of satisfaction do they have with their social situation, their friendships, their family, their sex lives, how happy are children, even something as simple as what percentage of their waking hours do they spend laughing, right? All these different matrices, when you measure them, you find hunter-gatherers are scoring way higher than we are. And yet we're the rich ones and those poor people are living with nothing. It's all perspective.
So people must ask you, like I've heard these top 5 questions that everyone asks you. Is one of them, like, if it's so great to be a hunter-gatherer, why don't you put on a loincloth and go and live in the forest?
That's one of those questions that's hardly worth answering. If China's so great, why don't you become Chinese? It's like it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I live in the modern world. I was born in the modern world. The opportunities to go live in the woods are extremely limited at this point. There aren't a lot of vast tracts of forest that anyone could just go live in if they'd like to. And also, one of the major points about why hunter-gatherers are successful and were successful for hundreds of thousands of years is that there's community. There are people who take care of each other. That's the key to hunter-gatherer existence. So, some Unabomber situation or a hermit living in the woods, that's not a hunter-gatherer. That's not a replication of a hunter-gatherer existence at all. And so, me going off and living in the woods is not really, in any sense, a return to an actual hunter-gatherer existence.
Okay, so the community is key.
Plus, I like beer. Yeah, community is key.
But you have, you live in a van. You have a dream life now. You travel around doing a podcast. You speak to people maybe this was pre-COVID, but in person, and you chat to them about your ideas, their ideas. So you are, because I was thinking, how can, we can't go back to this lifestyle, but how can we adopt it into our own daily routines?
Yeah, I've tried to introduce or maintain as many aspects of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle in my own life as I can, and not because I'm I feel any responsibility to skeptics or anything, but just because it makes me happy. And I think, one of the points of Civilized to Death is that the things that succeed in making us happy and in giving our lives meaning tend to be the things that have been present in our species' existence forever. So, we're going through a crisis right now where people are staring at their phones for 10 or 15 hours a day, and it's messing up their eyesight, and it's messing up their brain development. It's messing up their sense of happiness because what they see online is all this idealized Instagram bullshit, depiction of other people's lives. So they feel inferior by comparison. I've been reading recently, and I talked about this in Civilized to Death, that, suicide rates among teenagers are going through the roof. Clinical depression going through the roof, addiction, drug abuse, everything, it's just falling apart. And one of the major reasons is that people can't stop staring at this light and, sleep even because of the blue wavelengths and the light coming from the screen and so on. So what is that? What's going on there? There are all sorts of complicated things happening, but on a very simple level, for over a million years probably, our ancestors every night have sat around in a circle, telling stories, telling jokes, hanging out, playing music, looking at fire. That's what we do at night. We look at the fire. Mm-hmm. And so, a phone screen is a very cheap, kind of insidious way of kind of connecting to that appetite that we have. But if you return to the actual thing that you're hungry for, and you manage to design your life in such a way that you can sit around looking at a fire at night, you'll be much happier. I a couple of years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, when I went on the first van trip, I call them vanthropology tours. Right. So I think this was 2018, I think, was the first one, when I just got the van. My friend and I were going to be traveling together for a few months, and we loaded up our laptops with TV shows and movies that we wanted to see. And we thought, okay, we're going to be spending a lot of nights out in the woods somewhere. Let's watch, the Sopranos or The Wire or all these movies. And at the end of the summer, we hadn't watched a single one.
Wow.
Nothing. Because when you're sitting in the woods and you look up and there are beautiful stars in the sky and there's a river flowing next to you and you've got a fire going, who wants to open up a computer?
Yeah.
It's, in that environment, it just can't compare to the real thing. So I think that applies to many things. Why are we taking vitamin supplements? Well, it's because our food isn't nutritious anymore. Yeah, we've got lots of food, but nutritionally, it's empty. And I feel like, we can look at so many aspects of our lives and see the same thing. Got thousands of friends on Instagram and Twitter, but how many real friends do we have? I read a study recently that said, I think it was over half of the people interviewed in the United States said that there was no one in their life that they felt they could confide in. No one. That means that they don't have one friend. And we live in this time of incredible wealth, and yet over half of Americans surveyed, I think it was 60% or more, said they did not have $300 that they could saved up that they could use in case, like if the car broke down or they got an unexpected bill or something. So this wealth and this plenitude that we're constantly told that we should be grateful for, I think it's an illusion. I think most people's lives are impoverished and sad and lonely.
I think that's good for podcasts, though, because when I listen to your podcast, it really sounds like you sound like a friend, like a club. It's so intimate. Do you think that's one of the reasons people are tuning to these forms of entertainment?
Yeah, I think that's I think podcasting is, definitely one of the better manifestations of the modern world, or one of the aspects of the modern world that I'm most comfortable with, and I think does bring value to people's lives, because, as you say, it is a very intimate medium. And not only the intimacy, but the purity of it. I'm amazed that, I was driving down the road one day and I stopped at this place. It was called Date World or Date Town or something. And it was just this place along the highway where they sold dates. I guess there were a lot of date trees growing around there or something. It was in Arizona or New Mexico or someplace. Anyway, pull in there, going to buy some dates. And I see this guy, he's on a bicycle and he's got, saddle packs on it. And he's obviously like, this guy's riding long distance, And I go in and I see the guy in his spandex bike outfit and say hi to him. And we start chatting. And it turns out he's riding from, what was it? It was like from Houston to LA, I think. And it was a training run, because he had ridden his bike all around the world except for this one run through China, I think it was. And that summer he was going to go back. He had gotten permission from China to go and ride that one segment that he hadn't been able to do because of some visa situation. And he was training. So he's riding his bike along this highway through the desert. And I was like, dude, this is incredible. Like, do you have like an hour? Because I'd love to have you on my podcast, And I'm like, oh, sure. So we sit down, we do the podcast, and it's just this totally spontaneous thing. As you don't need a lot of gear. It's not super expensive. It's, a few $100 and a laptop, and you're pretty much good to go. and, record this conversation with the guy. And then I go use the Wi-Fi in Datetown to upload the thing, and it's out, and that's it. There's no corporation, no editing, just no hassle, no rigmarole, nobody looking over my shoulder telling me what words I can say and what we can talk about and what we can't mention, and no lawyers. It's like, fuck, it's so pure and direct. And I think that's the appeal of podcasting. I mean, I know there are podcasts that are highly produced, and that's old, Radio Lab or something. Yeah. That's a whole different kind of thing. But what you and I are doing, I think it's about the raw, unfiltered, unrefined, kind of high fiber quality of it.
Oh well, definitely you're doing it. I mean, it really feels like listening to the circle of friends that I would like to have.
Yeah, well, that's honestly a big motivation for me at this point. I didn't anticipate that when I started doing it, but at this point, I feel like a lot of the value that I'm able to give to people through the podcast is the community of other people. So, when I do these van trips, and of course, the audience is global, but I can only drive my van
when you come into Europe
in the US. Yeah, or Australia. Yeah, I would love to. But when I do these trips, other than last year with COVID, we would make a real point of saying, okay, we're going to be in Missoula, Montana next Wednesday at this, this brew pub at 8 p.m. Come on out. And it's not like, hey, you get to meet me. That's not the thing. It's you get to meet each other. And it's so cool because I've started to do the same route at this point. I, sort of have my favorite spots that I go to every year, and we'll do these things. And you see people like who you saw 3 years ago. They met each other at the first one, and they've been friends ever since. And, so this sense of community around the podcast, I think is fantastic. And I do what I can to try to promote it. I often play, people will send me little audio snips of like, hey, Chris, I'm climbing this mountain and listening to a podcast, and, just want to say hi to everybody. So I like to play those at the beginning to sort of, yeah. My friend Kyle Tierman turned me on to that. He has a podcast and he started doing that. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea, man.
I thought about for Christmas, I could get people on and write songs for them, for special guests, for special fans.
Like Christmas. Oh, as a gift for them. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, cool. And I mean, you've done that too. And when you invited me on this podcast, and I looked you up and I saw how you'd traveled all over Europe and sort of, played house parties in exchange for a place to crash and some food, and you're definitely tapping into community and spreading community and sort of making yourself the grain of sand in the oyster that the pearl can form around.
Thank you.
You definitely have a consciousness.
I think you're the only guest who actually researched me before coming on the show.
Really? Well, how do other guests decide whether to do the show or not?
They fall into different categories. Some of them are doing 12 podcasts a day, so they're just banging them out, and some of them say, oh well, they're just so bored of podcasts that that when somebody offers to write a song about them, okay, this is something different. So that's the the hook,
Yeah. No, I don't do a lot of podcasts because, I get so many requests. Sure. And I'm just tired of talking about myself, and also, doing my own podcast. I'm already doing that. And I feel a little bad about it because, a lot of people are just starting out and they're trying to, get a guest with some name recognition so they can leverage that into other guests. And, you know, and I get it. I understand. But yeah, no, I definitely look into the people and see who they are and what they're doing. So when I saw like, oh, you're a character, this guy's living an interesting life. From your were you some kind of a boy toy in Amsterdam or something?
Toy boy, yeah, that's a previous profession, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
what's your mother think about that?
She's more upset about the constipation song about Maria than she was about the toy baby.
Yeah. I just sort of go through a lot of my podcasts just hoping my mother will never listen to it. And she's my mother's 80 and she's awesome. She's a fantastic lady. But yeah, sometimes when I'm talking to a porn star or a dominatrix or something, I'm just thinking, oh, geez, Mom, please don't listen to this one.
You wrote Sex at Dawn, so I mean that's pushing the boat up. But then you said your dad edited it, so there's some sort of balance there, no?
Yeah. No, my parents are awesome. My dad was my sort of pre-editor in that book. You know, I had an editor from the publisher, of course, but before I sent anything into the publisher, my dad and I would go through it. And my dad was a writer, so he knew what he was doing. And he also, was someone who understood the value of honest feedback as opposed to supportive feedback. Okay. He was supportive and he, when he loved something, he told me he loved it. But when he didn't love something, he told me that too. And, but it was never about the content. It was always just writing style, structure, flow, that kind of thing. Because, he wasn't an expert in evolutionary, issues. But it was interesting too, because, my parents met when they were very young. They were both Catholic. They married at 20, I think my mother was, and my dad was 21, and they had me shortly after. And so they were, their lives were very, very monogamous and very kind of storybook romance. And, they could have, if they had chosen to, they could have felt threatened or criticized or, they could have been very oppositional, but they never were. They were just like, oh, this is your book. That's great. And it was all just about the quality of the book, not about feeling threatened or anything by it. So yeah, they're awesome people. And I think that's the way everyone needs to be, like if something works for you, it works for you. And if someone else is talking about some other approach that works for them, well, why would that be threatening? It's only threatening if you feel that there's some kind of lie at the center of your life, then you get threatened by stuff like that. But, it's like, homophobes, like, why are you threatened by homosexuality, dude? Like, what is the underlying insecurity that's being triggered here, Yeah. So.
Yes. And what else did I want to ask you about? Because I don't like talking to people too much about their books, because sometimes you feel like they've done, hundreds of podcast interviews about the subject before, and, so so many times you talk about the grasshoppers turning into swarming into locusts. And I heard you say that anecdote several times, and you must get tired of recycling these stories now. So I'm just going to read the book and write a song about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a good one. The grasshoppers and the locusts. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's another reason I don't do that many podcasts is, I don't want to, I don't want to feel like, like the Rolling Stones playing Satisfaction again, where you're just sort of going through the motions. Sex at Dawn was a lot more media, and partly because the book just hit bigger, and partly because it was my first book, and I accepted every interview request, everything. I mean, I remember I was living in Spain when it first came out, so there was also time zone issues. But I remember getting up at like 4 a.m. to do a 10-minute interview on some, I think it was even like an AM radio station out of like Topeka, Kansas. And I did this and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is insane. I was just doing every possible media thing. But it was great because I felt like, this is an important subject, and the book took off, and I just wanted to fuel it and sort of keep it going, and let more people hear about it, and it was great. It was fun. So, but I do try at this point, 12 years later, I'm happy to talk about books. So if you want to ask me any questions, don't hold back.
Oh, okay.
But that's why I don't do a lot of podcasts, because it's like, I don't want it to get stale.
I wanted to ask you about Graham Hancock as well, because you did an interview with him, and how do you feel about his theories and his books?
Well, I've only read Fingerprints of the Gods, so that's the only book I can really comment on at all. I like him a lot as a person. I've hung out with him a few times, with him and his wife. I think his daughter as well. I was speaking at a bizarre conference with him, and we spent some time there. It's called the Summit Series, and it's one of these things where it's sort of like a TED kind of thing, where they get all these intellectuals or CEOs or whatever, and get them all together, and then all these people pay a bunch of money to like hang out with you, but they don't actually pay you. So it's a really fucked up business model. And I didn't want to do it. I kept saying no, and then I finally agreed to do it just because Graham Hancock was going to be there, Wim Hof was going to be there, Esther Perel, a bunch of people that I know and like. And I thought, well, this will be a chance for us all to hang out. And it was on this cruise ship. And the cruise ship took off from Miami, and we were supposed to be going to some island where there was this elaborate lunch planned or something. But then I don't know if it was a weather thing or what happened, but then like, oh no, we can't go to the island. So basically for 3 days, we were just on this giant cruise ship that just went in a big circle from Miami out into the ocean and circled back. And I remember the first night Donald Trump was elected. So the rest of the trip was kind of a grieving, mournful process.
Well, it's like, where were you when JFK was shot? I mean, that kind of thing, no?
Yeah, it's that kind of situation. I'll never forget. And, Thievery Corporation played, and like Quentin Tarantino was there, and I don't know, all these people. And, but, it was this weird thing because it was all these kind of like young entrepreneurs, like, hip, rich movers and shakers kind of crowd. And a lot of it was all about how, so-and-so, like this new app is going to save the world. And, this startup is going to change everything, and disruptive technology and all this stuff. It is all this kind of like ecological consciousness. And yet we're on this giant fucking cruise ship just going in a circle, spewing carbon into the atmosphere, dumping all our shit into the ocean, destroying coral reefs as we go. And it was like the most sort of hypocritical endeavor I think I've ever been involved with. Anyway, but Graham Hancock was there.
And you find out, later on all these QAnon message boards that it was a pedophile boat going around and around for 3 days.
It could have been. I don't know. It was, I couldn't wait to get off. But it was, but anyway, Graham Hancock, I think Graham is great. And he's a really good writer, a really cool guy. Fingerprints of the Gods, I'm unconvinced. I thought that the beginning of the book was really interesting. The stuff about the Piri-Reis map, which he talked about, which was a map from the 1500s, I think, that came from a Turkish map maker, but in the margins he wrote that he had constructed it from other maps that he had seen. And it's this very detailed map of a coastline, but it's been a mystery because no one could find like what coastline is he talking about on this map. And then in I guess the 1970s or 80s or something, the United States Geological Service was doing mapping of the coastline of Antarctica using these like vibrational waves that would go down through the ice and then bounce off water or land below, so they could map the coastline that was under a mile of ice, and they found this section of coastline that perfectly matched this map. And yet that coastline had been under ice for 10 or 12,000 years or something. So that to me was like, holy shit, that is really interesting. But then all the stuff about the pyramids and the direction and this, facing this constellation and this, I don't know enough about pyramids or astronomy or mathematics to, form an opinion on that. And then ultimately the question of like, well, if there was an advanced civilization, an advanced technological civilization on the planet 20,000 years ago or 40,000 years ago, I feel like there would be physical evidence of that.
Evidence, yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that we would have, we've got spearheads from 80,000 years ago. We've got cave paintings from 25, 30,000 years ago. If there was an advanced civilization on the planet around, that long ago, why haven't we found anything? Why haven't we found, stainless steel or radioactive signatures of, if they were splitting atoms or, why are there no satellites? Why is it just seems that there would be more evidence of that. And so the evidence sort of reflected in, pyramids or some of the artifacts in South America, I don't know that is evidence of an advanced civilization in the past. It could be evidence that that people are just capable of a lot more than we give them credit for. But I don't know. As I say, I'm not an expert on that.
But it does make you wonder
material,
though,
so it's really hard.
Because the time frame if the time frame is like 14, if the universe is about 14 billion years old, and then all through that time, and now we discovered the wheel maybe 10,000 years ago or something like that. It seems a bit unlikely now that we're the pinnacle of the universe's evolution.
Yeah. There's a thing I talk about in Civilized to Death called the Great Filtering, which is, it's the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi was sort of asking these same questions, and he was trying to say, well, wait a minute, if there are, this number of galaxies, and within each of those galaxies, there are this number of suns that have planets orbiting roughly at the same distance from the sun, from their star that we are. And, the odds of there being an atmosphere is this and that. He did this whole calculation, and he's like, okay, so there are, 500 trillion planets that could, where life could start. It's infinitesimal. It's almost impossible that we are the only one, as you just said. So what the hell's going on? Where is everybody? And so they came up, the sort of most prominent response to that is that what happens with life is that it becomes intelligent, it develops technology, and because technological innovation happens at a much greater velocity than moral and philosophical advancement, the technology outruns the capacity of the life form to control it. And so the life form basically destroys itself with its, either by polluting the planet to make it unlivable, or through, war, or, biological accident, something escapes from a lab, or, something like that. So that there's sort of a natural snuffing out of life. Life develops to a certain point and then wipes itself out. And so, if you look at it from that perspective, then you're right that we aren't the pinnacle, and that we aren't the only form of life. But every other form of life that has existed has, blown itself up. So I don't know. It's kind of, it's not a very, I talk about that at the end of Civilized to Death, and I propose a different, much more optimistic scenario, which is that maybe sometimes life forms get to the point that where we are now, where we're looking and we see the end. We are, we've been living with nuclear weaponry that could have wiped us out for the last 50 years, and it's kind of a miracle that we haven't, that there hasn't been an accident, that we haven't, the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were within hours of launching a nuclear attack, and so maybe some species, some forms of intelligence come to the point where we are now, and they back off and they say, wait a minute, what are we really getting here? Like, what are we advancing toward? And, the motivation of writing Civilized to Death was to try to show people, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, that the things that really bring meaning to our lives are the same things that have brought meaning to our lives for 100 to 300,000 years. Community, good food, not too much, movement, feeling healthy in your body, telling stories to kids, making love with someone you feel close to, sitting by a fire at night, appreciating the warmth of the fire because you feel how cold it is just a few steps away, appreciating food because you know what hunger feels like. I think the best piece of furniture I own is a hammock. And, we've had hammocks forever. We had hammocks before we were actually Homo sapiens, because both chimps and bonobos, our closest primate relatives, they both sleep in hammocks. They weave together branches in trees every night and sleep in that. So I think that there's no need to go forward. At this point, we've gone forward enough. I think it's kind of, Joseph Campbell's story of the hero with 1,000 faces of, every society has the story of the young person who goes out into the world and faces challenges and has near-death experiences and learns from these difficulties. And then at a certain point, Odysseus or, whomever it is, say, okay, it's time to go home now. And they go home with the knowledge that they have gained in their journey. And, as T.S. Eliot said in the Four Quartets, the end of all our journeys will be to return where we started and know the place for the first time. So you go home with knowledge. So my ambition or my hope for our species is that we turn back and we go home with the knowledge of, how we can generate energy from the sun and how we can, restore grasslands and how we can restore fisheries and how we can allow the planet to thrive with us on it, because we know how to reduce our own population. We have the technology of birth control now. We can have as much sex as we want, and we don't need to have babies. We can control these processes in intelligent ways and, distribute the wealth in ways that are better for everyone, because wealthy people are miserable. And there's a whole section in Civilized to Death about that. Being wealthy is not fun when people around you are living in poverty. So I think we just need to be selfish, but with some wisdom, and things can work out much differently.
Oh, that's beautiful. I've got to stop now, just fade into the song now, because that's going to sound so good when you finish that. But that's brilliant. I mean, I agree with you, and I disagree also, because, in that, it's like the same argument using against civilization is the people say against religion, in that, we use it. It's a beautiful values, and, it starts in its originality, its conception, its rights, but then human greed gets involved and it destroys it. We should be living in paradise now.
Yeah, well, I think we were living in paradise. That's the thing. I have a very Rousseauian view, I guess. But, one of the points I made in Civilized to Death is that virtually nobody ever chooses to live in civilization if they have lived in both worlds. So when you have people, who've been colonial Americans, for example, who were captured by Indians and, went and lived with the Indians for a while, and then they always choose to go back to the Indians. It just always works out that way. And so I think that tells us something pretty strong about who has a better way of life.
You said the people who went on the Beagle, they never saw them again.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's been great. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat to me, Chris.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. And I'll get in touch about getting you on my podcast if you're still willing to do that.
Well, of course, that would be an honor. I just can't believe it, because I feel like I didn't realize how such a great underground figure you are. And but when I reached out to you, and
an underground figure. Yeah.
I don't cult. I don't want to say it. I can't find the right word now. Cult leader sounds, but someone who, also the people who listen to all your podcasts, many of them don't agree with you. I heard the people say that I'm a monogamist, or I'm a gun tooting Republican. But you have this, people. Some people really connect with. No, this kind of this because we all recognize the system's broken and we're not happy, but we can't articulate it as well as you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I'm like the father figure or the uncle, you know. I think most of my audience, I'm the quirky, weird ass uncle. So I'm happy. That works for me.
Brilliant.
All right, Jack.
All right,
good talking
to you.
Pleasure.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
You've got emergency surgery and antibiotics. Half your work done by your team of robotics. Till you've confessed you're depressed and distressed and depressed. What's the matter with you? You can travel through the sky sitting down in a chair. Get a drink, eat a meal, and there's Wi-Fi up there. But at the slightest delay, you complain like it's the end of the world. So why aren't you happy now? Why aren't you in awe? You've been civilized to death. You've got your mother in a home, kids at child's care. You're working 7 days a week just to keep them there. You've been promised all your free time when you're retired. You're the pyre for the fire of incessant growth, where any movement's advancement or progress or both. You're like a falling man who insists he's flying. So why aren't you happy now? Why aren't you in awe? You've been civilized to death. Time still to put in. Can't be long till you're retiring. Scratching on the walls till your time is up. One last sup at the poison cup. Take me back to the simple life when we surrendered to being alive. We lived by the ocean and drank from the stream in a world of abundance. Our lives were a dream. We had all we needed. Happy in our tribe, surrounded by beauty that you can't describe. The trees gave us everything. We worship the sun, and nature was home, and we were as one. Well, thanks for tuning in. Really hope you enjoyed the episode and the song. Please rate and review, share. It's on Deezer, iTunes, Spotify, everywhere songs and podcasts live. And check out Christopher's podcast, Tangentially Speaking, and his website, chrisryanphd.com, to learn more about his work. And thanks to my musicians Maurizio San Nicola, Massimino Vodza, and Luigi Falcione, and my researcher Dori Verbo. And thanks to you, the listener. See you next time.